We begin this hour with tensions building between Brussels and Moscow. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says his country is ready to break ties with the European Union. This comes after the EU threatened to impose new sanctions targeting key sectors of Russia's economy over the imprisonment of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. In televised remarks, Lavrov pointed out that Russia doesn't want to be isolated, but if the EU follows through with these sanctions, Russia will be ready to split from the bloc.
We're just saying that we're ready to do this if we see once again, like we've seen numerous times before, that Brussels imposes sanctions that pose risks to our economy, specifically to the most sensitive sectors. Once again, we don't want to distance ourselves from the international community, but we need to be ready for this. If you want peace, prepare for war.
And Lavrov also noted that the EU's Russia-phobic stance started after 2004 when the bloc acquired the Baltic nations and other states he says have historical grievances. And the U.S. and NATO are stepping up their presence in the Black Sea as Ukraine sets its sights on building 2 new naval bases along the coast, ratcheting up tensions with Russia. This as Russia calls on the U.S. to cease the saber rattling and military flexing, as 2 U.S. Navy destroyers have been operating with allies in the Black Sea since January. So for more on this, we will bring in former Pentagon official Mike Maloof. So Mike, in Joe Biden's first week in office, mind you, we're only about 3 weeks in, we saw NATO really step up its presence in the Black Sea. Any coincidence? I mean, destroyers aren't jets. They don't just get to wherever they're going when they want. It takes a while to get to their destination. So this had to be in the works for some time.
Yeah, it's not coincidental. I don't believe in coincidences. This is very purposeful. You got to keep in mind that NATO has been has actually announced that it will be increasing its activities in the Black Sea. And of course, due to some alleged Russian threat, yet unexplained, and what we're concerned about is that with the influx of more NATO, it could prompt Russia to bring in more of its Baltic Sea forces into the Black Sea, and basically having an arms race occurring within the Black Sea. It is in the sphere of influence of Russia and way far away from anything the United States has. Yeah. And you got to keep in mind that this is something that is a part of an effort by neoconservatives in the Biden administration to push NATO up against the Federation. And there's some interesting indicators of that. One of which is that Biden just appointed Victoria Nuland as the new Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. And who is her husband? Well, let me say first, she was instrumental in the coup in Ukraine. Yeah. When Yovanovitch was overthrown. Secondly, her husband is Robert Kagan, who is the co-founder of the neoconservative Center for, or the Project for the New American Way, and which believes in unilateral military intervention.
Well, Mike, I think you kind of addressed this a little bit, but maybe if you can expand on this. Obviously, Ukraine's role in the rising tension is that they're building bases along the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Sure. But on the other side of this, it's their land. Why is Russia uncomfortable with that?
Well, the western portion of Ukraine wants to join NATO. Now, NATO is not going to allow them to come in because of Russia. And at the same time, you have NATO actually wanting to do military exercises with Ukraine. So this is just one level below. So even though they're not members, it's not unheard of that NATO practices military maneuvers with Israel. It is done with Israel. They're doing it with Ukraine, and they've done it with other countries. So, but it's all happening in Russia's sphere of influence, far away from anything that is indicative, first of all, of any threat, but secondly, far away from the United States waters. And it's not and what was a little unusual, I think, is that the Russian embassy in Washington came out. The ambassador said that he wanted us to stop saber rattling in their Black Sea area of influence, and they should stick to their own territorial waters.
Well, Mike, like you said, this is nothing new. The U.S. and NATO performing exercises with people who aren't officially in part of any bloc or any defined group. But the new SecDef, Lloyd Austin, he's going to take part in his first NATO defense meeting next week in Brussels. How do you think Lloyd Austin's tenure is going to shape NATO's mission? And do you think there's any threat of mission creep the longer NATO hangs out in Ukraine?
Oh, yeah, it will. There inevitably will be nation creep. What he's trying to do in NATO is try to get the U.S. back in a leadership role, if you will, and it's questionable whether that will occur because the NATO countries themselves have their own interests, even though, as you pointed out in the first story, that EU and Russia are at odds. There's not going to be a split, which was clarified later on by Mr. Putin's press secretary. But there will be tensions. They want to hike tariffs and what have you, and that can really set up a consternation and between the bloc, the EU bloc, and Russia. So it's going to be and again, you have the neoconservatives pushing this agenda. One country you got to watch out for, of course, is Turkey. And my sources tell me that they're concerned that Turkey, through its expanding influence into the South Caucasus and into Azerbaijan, may try to push the NATO influence into that region as well.
There's always mission creep, Mike, always. Mike Maloof.
Well,
always good to have your expertise. Thank you.